Order online at picassospizza.net.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to this Trainwreck Sports Podcast, where we are here to pay the bills. Welcome, everybody. It is May 6th, 2025. It is a beautiful day here, at least in Chicago, Illinois. How is it doing down there in Olean, New York, Carson? And we got Mike Bundt along for the ride. I don't know where he is in the world. We haven't seen Mike, so he might be here. He might not. Mike from an undisclosed location, USA. I'll at least make that assumption that he's in the country. Carson, how you doing?
I've been doing great. Hey, I mean, rainy day for like the fifth day in a row down here in Olean, but what are you going to do? It's getting to be that time of year. Summer's around the corner. Hey, Bills off season, ramping up a little bit here. The draft's over with. So things will settle down a little bit here going forward, and things should pick back up within the next month or two. So I'm excited. Let's go.
Absolutely. How we doing, Bun?
I'm doing good. I'm not disclosing my location. We do not know. We do not want people to know if I'm upset, happy, sad, or my emotions. Last week got a little heated and emotional, and we're trying to get back on the right track today. So this is going to be a very calm show for me.
That's great. Well, you're gonna still deliver that passion somehow, some way, Mike. I'm sure we'll get something out of you here. But thank you guys for joining along here tonight on the Pay the Bills podcast. We're going to have a shorter episode tonight, but we wanted to get here. We got some stuff to touch on because obviously right after we got off if you didn't listen to last week's episode either, go listen to last week's very impassioned episode about our general manager, about the Bills, just the Bills. Basically, it was like it was started off with the Bundt and Beane comments and turned into a discussion about being a Bills fan in 2025, which I think it was a good conversation. So go listen to that. Obviously, go there. But it stemmed from the conversation of, did the Bills need a wide receiver, or did they need to address wide receiver more in the draft? And obviously, was it even the next? It was Wednesday morning at least, right? Elijah Moore. It was the next morning. I know I at least uploaded the podcast and then checked like an hour later on my phone and saw Elijah Moore had signed with the Buffalo Bills. So he is going to be a Bill. It's a deal up to about, I think, what, $5 million?
$5 million, yeah.
What it turns out to be, Carson. So, what did you think of the signing? Obviously, this is something that was in the works before Bundt and Beane went on his rant. I would imagine they've touched base with Moore's camp at least a month ago, even we're keeping in contact with them. Like, if we don't draft somebody, we'd be interested, because that's basically what they said. Rather than using a draft pick, we took a swing on this guy who could produce next year. So I feel like he knew they would at least have a chance at picking up when they went on this when he went on this rant last week. Do you like the signing? Just in a vacuum, do you like the signing? Do you like Moore as a player? I have a lot of questions. I mean, I think it could be fun, but is it going to matter? Is all this going to matter when it gets to August is really what I want to get down to tonight. So what do you think, Carson? What do you think of the signing? I
think that's a good question. I think, well, first of all, to address a little bit what we talked about last week as far as how the Bills like to invest in their wide receiver core, and the fact that they do. They do invest in the receiving core. Looking at Moore, he's 34th overall pick in 2021. So the draft capital's there. The potential's still there. He's 25 years old. So, hey, there's still some things that can be unlocked with him. And he's a guy who really has had some unstable quarterback play throughout his whole career, starting off, obviously, with Zach Wilson, and then whatever was going on with Cleveland with Deshaun Watson and Jameis Winston these past 2 years. So I think this is a good chance for him to have a chance. If he's ever going to break out in the NFL, it's going to be with the Bills, I think. This is a really, really low-risk deal, I think, with a lot of reward as a possibility. I mean, he had, over 500 receiving yards the last 2 seasons, 61 catches last year. So he contributed in that. Cleveland offense is more of a check-down type of guy and a little bit of a gadget guy. I'm a little concerned that it could be a redundant type of role as far as Curtis Samuel's usage, along with how they use Khalil Shakir a little bit and that type of player. But the Bills need guys who can separate. And Moore's a guy who can separate pretty well, and he can be used in a lot of versatile situations as far as gadget guys, returning, all that type of stuff, running the football a little bit. So I'm here for it. I like the signing, and another guy added to that wide receiver room certainly cannot hurt.
Yeah, I'm with you, Carson. Elijah Moore is a low risk, high reward type player. You're not spending much money on him, so if he doesn't pan out in camp, you can easily move on from him if you need to. Uh, I kind of agree with you. A little bit of a redundant role, but we'll see. It buys them a little bit of insurance in case Curtis Samuel doesn't return to the form that they thought he would be heading into last season. If Curtis Samuel continues to struggle, maybe Elijah Moore takes over for Samuel in that role, and maybe Samuel becomes expendable at that point. I do find it a little ironic the reaction from fans, though, that many are super thrilled about this move, that were so upset that they didn't draft a receiver in the mid rounds. When at the end of the day, like as much as I wanted a mid round receiver, it was going to be a guy that was going to be like the number 5 or number 4 receiver on the team that would contribute like 25 catches max, probably. Like, what are the actual expectations for Elijah Moore? Like, if he's behind Curtis Samuel, he's not getting 60 catches like he did the last couple seasons in Cleveland. So it is kind of funny because this is kind of what I've always brought up when we talk about the receiver room. Elijah Moore is a name. So Bruce Nolan did a poll. What would you rather have, Elijah Moore, then he named a 5th round pick receiver? And of course, everybody picked Moore because like they know who he is. They've seen him play at the NFL level, and I would pick Moore too in that scenario. But it also goes to show that all the complaining about not drafting a receiver wasn't really because they didn't draft one. It just shows like there's like kind of like hypocrisies here. People are contradicting themselves. They love Moore, but then they say it's better than a receiver that they drafted when they're all about drafting a receiver. It's just kind of funny to me how this all pans out when this guy is probably going to be a minimal role either way.
It's just kind of funny is a way for Bundt to say things that I won't repeat live on air, I think. But I'm with you completely. We have to call a spade a spade. Let's pick a guy, Jaden Royals. That's the name that everybody's gonna love to pick on because he's gonna be on the Chiefs this year. Would Jaden Royals have had more snaps than Elijah Moore on this offense in this upcoming season? I think it's hard to believe. It's hard to say that either of them are gonna get a lot of snaps at all. I got into a big argument the other day on Twitter, and I knew that this guy was just going to keep going. But I really sometimes just want to get my takes out there on the timeline for people to see and use this person for this. And I'm like we're talking about wide receiver 5. We're talking about on Madden. Sometimes people don't even have 5 wide receivers on their team. Like that's what we're talking about. I'm not saying it's the video game, but like we're talking about a guy who's going to play. If things go right for the Bills, a guy that's going to play 25% of the snaps, 20% of the snaps, maybe. And you want this to happen. You want Elijah Moore to play 10% of the snaps this season because all the other receivers are so good and the Bills are healthy and they're so awesome. They don't need the 5th wide receiver to produce. And Dalton Kincaid's awesome, I also didn't put Dalton Kincaid on the timeline on this today. We have to discuss the Dalton Kincaid discourse craziness that I've seen. But I just think value. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a guy who's going to compete for snaps in training camp with Laviska Shenault. Like it's not a guy who's taking snaps from Shakir or Coleman or Palmer just because of the value that they put on them. And Brandon Beane, in that Go Long article that came out yesterday, which if any Bills fan should go read Beane talking in that article and kind of explaining himself in his draft class and just kind of going through. And he doubled down on a lot of the stuff he said on the radio program a couple weeks or last week on Monday. But one of the things he says is, I didn't sign Josh Palmer because I thought he was an average player. I signed Josh Palmer for he kept saying $11 million a year in this thing because I think he's a good player. And that's where a lot of my argument last week stemmed, and Bundt, you too, you brought this up too, was you just didn't like that they signed Josh Palmer. It's not that you didn't like that the Bills didn't address the position. It's just that you didn't like the player. You didn't like that it was Keon Coleman instead of Ladd McConkey. Like these are the things that people are nitpicking. And then that's you trying to say you're smarter than the Bills front office. And none of us are smarter than any front office in the NFL. Even the worst teams, none of us are smarter than them. I'm sorry, we're not. So that's where it gets crazy in the discourse. It's fun. It's fine to have opinions, but you have to be honest about where your opinions are coming from. That's where I think the discourse got crazy for me is the positional value of an Elijah Moore or a 4th round, 5th round wide receiver doesn't really matter to winning the Super Bowl this year. And if it did, if they hit a lottery ticket on a guy and he turns into a superstar, great. But you can't bank on that.
Can't count on that. No.
And people are mad at them for I've seen a lot of discourse. Well, they're just hoping that Keon Coleman or Dalton Kincaid get better. Okay, well, they would also just be hoping that a 4th round pick would produce this year. It's all the same hope. Like, it's all the same shit. They're choosing who to believe in. They're
that's the hypocrisy.
In their big assets.
That's the hypocrisy right there. And that's the part that bothers me, is because when they signed Elijah Moore, I saw some people saying, well, this is why you draft a receiver, because you get a cost-controlled asset. And I'm like, they're paying Moore next to nothing. Like, they're getting a proven NFL player for next to nothing as depth, rather than investing a 3rd or 4th round pick that they don't believe in a draft that is deeper with defensive linemen. They drafted a lineman because they think that they are getting more value in the 3rd round, in the 4th round from a lineman than what they would be getting from a 5th receiver, that they don't believe in their long-term potential. And then they got a cheap receiver that if it doesn't work out, they can move on from after 1 year. So a lot of the arguments being thrown out are just fans that don't agree with the players that Beane chose with the picks. And like you said, Jake, had they just taken a different receiver like McConkey, or if they would have signed someone else, they would have been perfectly fine. And that's why this whole argument has been kind of ridiculous. It's really not about the asset management. It's about the players they brought in with those assets.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look back even at last offseason, like Matt Collins coming in, people were really didn't know what to think with that whole thing. They thought, he was going to be a guy who just ran block the whole time. And although he did run block for them majority of the time, like, he provided so much more. And that kind of shows, like, the front office, they know things. Like, it's things like that. And then you bring in Amari Cooper. They probably, I think they probably did end up probably losing that deal for Amari Cooper at the deadline. The production just wasn't there. I know he battled some health things, but everybody, including us, let's be honest, we're going crazy because Amari Cooper, he has the name value.
Absolutely.
So when you look at it, like, and you look at the remaining free agents and the top names that are out there, there's a reason they're still out there. It's because 32 GMs right now, as of this point in time, don't think they're quality enough to be on a roster. So I think, like, a lot of fans sometimes get caught up in that name value, and it's hard not to, honestly. But I mean, looking at it, like, yeah, you guys both said it. The front office, they know what they're doing, and they've proven time and time again because they still have a job, and the team continues to win.
Yeah. So Carson, quick on just your opinion on Elijah Moore, the player. Like, he's like, because he's a really, like, for me, a polarizing guy. Like, I wasn't as high on him as people when he came out, but I saw why people were excited about him and the explosive ability. He's been in horrible quarterbacking situations. The Browns and the Jets are his 2 teams for the last 4 years, 3 years, whatever it is. So it's not, I don't have to name them all off, but guys, like, it's been pretty terrible. So it's
Mike
been
White.
one of the worst possible situations. That's who, and he lit it up. That's who
he did.
That's who
yes,
he did.
That's why I name dropped him. Him and Jameis too.
Him and exactly. So when he's had competent play, he's been able to make plays. He's going to have extreme more than competent plays. What do you think, Carson?
I think he's going to be – that's a tough question because this offense is just weird, right? Because I'll keep this quick because we got to get to the next thing. But we run the ball a lot. We set up play action a lot, and I think Elijah Moore is going to be the perfect guy for play action. So I think there's going to be a time where he's going to be a key piece in the offense. I think it's going to be when they want to take shots in the play action game or key 3rd and short situations. So it all depends because there's so much time. Like, he might not even make the team. I think he's going to make the team, but, like, you never know because there's always a guy or 2 a year. And then again, we had high expectations 2 years ago for Trent Sherfield, and the guy had like 8 catches all season. So it's weird. I mean, I don't know how high they view him, but I could definitely see him being a guy who puts up 500 yards again. He's just Mr. Consistent. And I think there's definitely a spot for him on this team, even if other guys do similar tasks and roles as he does.
And do you mind if I put some input too quick for Jake?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I think Moore is safe to make the team as long as he doesn't have an awful training camp in which he
Yeah.
bombs or no chemistry right away, I think it's hard to project what he will do because we don't know what the Bills' opinion is on him versus Curtis Samuel. And right now, we're projecting Palmer to play a big role. We're projecting Shakir to be a big role. Keon Coleman was a second-round pick. So those are three guys that you figure are going to be set in what they're going to do on the offense. So do the Bills think that Samuel will bounce back? Maybe turf toe held him back last year, or did the Bills bring in Elijah Moore to replace Samuel? If Moore comes in and takes over Samuel's role or takes over his snaps, Moore could be a very productive player and he could shatter our expectations of what he can do. But if Moore is the number 5 receiver on the team, then you kind of have to keep things modest. I think a fair expectation for Moore, if you're just projecting without really knowing what his role is saying something like 25 to 30 catches for around 350 to 400 yards. If he ends up in the Curtis Samuel role, Elijah Moore has 50 catch potential and could be a 500, 600 plus guy on the Bills. If he ends up as wide receiver number 5, though, he could have 15 catches for like 150 yards. So there's a lot of uncertainty. I think most of the fan base is looking at his numbers the last 2 years in Cleveland and thinking he's going to be a guy that's going to step up with Josh Allen. But he's going to have to earn it first. And I don't think it's a given that he's going to surpass Samuel. But the fact that the Bills brought in a proven vet means that they're not willing to just give it to Samuel either. They want somebody to earn that wide receiver 4 spot.
Absolutely. We'll see. It's going to be a fun competition. Like between the cornerback competition, the D-line competition, and this back end of the wide receiver competition, it's going to be a really exciting training camp. And the punter competition, because we need a punter. Someone's got
Brad Robbins
on this team. Get your bets in now, right now, Carson. We'll mark our corners once we see the full thing, and we'll go full on for it. All right, draft class. We didn't get to talk about this draft class at all. We're not going to harp on it. We're going to talk about these guys all year long. But Carson and then Bundt, now that the dust has settled, a couple weeks after the draft, how are you feeling overall about the Bills draft haul with everything, context included, Elijah Moore signing, everything? How are you feeling about their haul?
I like it. I think I'd put them in the territory of B plus. You know, they came in and knowing what they wanted, they got what they wanted. Obviously, they attacked defense heavily up front as well. So I think, you know, when it was consensus pretty much that the defense is, kind of been holding them back in the biggest of moments, I think one of your options is to go heavily in the draft at the defense slot, and they have done that. So I like what they did with Sanders up front, Harrison, obviously the corner, along with Landon Jackson. So I think they've done a great job. I mean, time will only tell. What people grade them and everything like that really doesn't matter until the pads actually come on. So I think people can get caught up in that. But I think they got what they wanted, which is what you like to see if you're in the front office. And they seem happy with it. So I think this is something where, we're going to have to come back at the end of the year and kind of reevaluate. But there's definitely some areas where I think, okay, well, they definitely got better. And I'm excited to see how Harrison does. I think he's going to be somebody who's got plenty of potential. He looks like a freak athlete, obviously, with his blazing 40. So we'll have to see here. It should be a fun camp, fun preseason, and we'll see how it translates to regular season big boy football.
Absolutely.
I'll give the Bills an A for their vision in the draft. I'll give them a TBD to be determined as far as how it will play out. If you had to give an instant draft grade, I'm thinking probably a B or B plus. I guess I'll give a B plus because I'm biased a little bit with the Bills, but I like the vision. It was clear to anyone watching the team at the end of last season that their defensive line is what was holding them back from being a Super Bowl team at that moment. We had countless conversations going into the Kansas City game about their defensive line and would it be able to step up to the challenge, and they didn't. They didn't, and that's the fact. And that's why the Bills have gone heavy in free agency and the draft, getting some big boys, getting some guys that can hopefully help their pass rush, and then Hairston, a little bit of a risk, but I love the upside and going after a guy that is the fastest athlete in this draft class. Will it work out 100%? I have no idea. But if you're going to swing for the fences. I don't want the safe pick. The Bills have had too many safe picks with a lot of these draft picks. And sure, you're going to have a high floor, but you're not going to have – I don't want a lower ceiling. I want the highest ceiling possible right now because what they've been doing hasn't gotten them to the top. So I think taking a swing on a guy like Hairston shows that they know they need to improve the athletic profile of some of their rooms, and we'll see if it works out.
Absolutely. I think that's if you're like you just said, if you're going to take a swing, you have to take it on a guy with an elite trait and that speed. And it's one of the things Beane talked about in that Go Long article, which I thought was a really good, like I mentioned earlier, really good piece of just kind of in explaining the vision and just standing on business, for lack of a better term, really for what he's talking about. But he said it's not just like blazing like track speed for Hairston. They don't want track speed. There's great game speed in there too. And Ty had made a great question to ask, like, yeah, maybe he gets beat on the jump ball, but it's a guy that can help you, match Kansas City running crossers all day across the field. Like that's a guy who's gonna be able to run with them all day. And that's just, it's not a skill set they've had. Their corners the last couple of years have just been slow. It is what it is. Like they haven't prioritized speed. They've wanted big, rangy guys who can play in that zone, take up a lot of space, stay in front of people. And make plays on the ball when they need to. They haven't wanted a type like Hairston. So I'm with you guys, and just like the variability he specifically brings. And then they needed to go after the D line. Like this D line needed youth. It needed a youth movement. It needed just an injection of talent, fresh talent. I don't know how you watch. We talked about the Eagles all last year, and they talk about the Eagles a lot in this article. And we're going to talk about the Eagles build for a long time, honestly, because they've done it a great way. But the Eagles too, like besides the AJ Brown trade and Saquon Barkley and everything else in there, what have the Eagles done over and over again? They just add to that O line, add to that D line. When they picked Jalen Carter, they didn't need Jalen Carter. Like everybody is like, oh man, just go get that. Like that was a bonus pick for them. It was just because they wanted to go get talent. The Bills haven't done it to that extent, but it's kind of the same vein of with the guys. Was it 11 guys right now on the roster on that D line? Like competitive ass camp. Heads are on the line, playing time's on the line, like valuable playing time's on the line. The only two guys who are for sure getting snaps are Greg Rousseau and Ed Oliver. That like everybody else is your spot is up. That is really what we're looking at here. And maybe Joey Bosa just easily takes that job. Maybe Daquan Jones easily takes that job. But the way they've set it up, and that's another thing Beane touches on in this, is they're going to have a competitive ass camp. And it's hard to have a competitive camp when you're a Super Bowl contender. Yeah. And so to have that hunger starting in training camp for a team that is going to be one of the best teams in the NFL really sets a tone. And the coaching staff has to love it. They have to love it. So I'm excited about the draft class. I'm excited the way that they set up the competitions on the D line, in the cornerback room, and like I said, the back end of that wide receiver room. It's going to be fun. Guys, Dalton Kincaid, have you seen this picture? And am I crazy that people should not be taking any stock into a zoomed in photo of a man during OTAs in April? Am I okay to just let it play out?
He's wide receiver 2 now.
Listen, bro, he's been on the beach. Like, I don't know. Also, like, has he ever been big?
No.
And Beane even says in the article today, I put him in a bad spot in the media. I don't want him to turn into this hulking tight end. I want him to have game strength so he can get off the line. That's all he said. That he clarified that today. And it's the internet, instead of reading, this is my thing about Brandon Beane. This is where it all plays into this, guys. Instead of reading Brandon Beane's words for what he said about Dalton Kincaid and about his size and the clarification, the internet saw a screenshot of a picture of him and decided that he was a bust and that he didn't listen to Beane and he showed up out of shape and small and they're fucked.
He's never been big, and it's always worked for him. He's always been a guy who's athletic and smooth when he runs routes, and he's crisp. He's just natural. And I think if you're going to want him to be a guy like Dawson Knox build, I can't see that ever becoming him. I don't think that's going to be in his play style. He's also a guy, you brought in, you got Hawes, you got Zach Davidson, you even have Knox to help for those reasons, to block. You can relieve some of the stress off of Kincaid. And I know they love the 2 tight end sets. They've kind of slowly weaned away a little bit from that, but I'm not worried about Dalton Kincaid as far as what he looks like and did he gain 25 pounds or any of this nonsense. Just stay healthy. Let him play his game. He's still entering his 3rd year. He's still got a ton of upside. I'm not worried about him. I think he's going to take that next step this year, especially if the offense opens up the pass game a little bit more than what they have in the past.
Yeah, the Dalton Kincaid conversation over the last year has really been an interesting one to me. I feel like I'm partially responsible for like the fan base overhyping him. I'm not saying me alone, but like us content creators, like here at Trainwreck, Cover One, Built in Buffalo, Buffalo Rumblings, like because when he was drafted, all of us knew that he was more of a pass catching tight end than he was a traditional blocking tight end, and that he was really brought in to help out their passing game. So what does he do as a rookie? He has 72 catches for nearly 700 yards. Like, that's a fantastic rookie season for a tight end. Then the very next year, the Bills go to more of a run-based attack. He struggles a little bit, regresses in some areas, goes down to mid-40s in catches, doesn't put up the yards or the numbers everyone expects. And now kind of the talking points around him is that he's a bust or that he's a disappointment. He's still averaging like 55 catches a year. In his first 2 years in the NFL as a tight end, which is fantastic. Like, but he has this perception of like he's letting the franchise down and the fan base down. Like, I still think Kincaid is a huge part of their plans and their pass game going forward. I don't know if he's ever going to be as good as I was hoping he was going to be, but I still think that Kincaid is like a 60 to a 70 catch guy in the future that can be a 700 plus, 800 plus tight end. Now, will he ever live up to that? We'll see. But it's funny. Like, I don't care if he's built or not, as long as he's effective as a pass catching tight end. Like, if they drafted the guy from Georgia Tech to block and maybe take a little bit off Dalton Kincaid's chest, like, I'm not upset with that at the end of the day.
I completely agree. And I also think the fan base does not give enough context to injuries, and the injuries are not an excuse, but the bro had a torn PCL he was playing on. Like, he was toughing it out, and he was out there, and that's the kind of guy you want. You want a guy that wants to be out there during that. But the quarterback himself talked about it right away about in the post-game interview, or maybe it was the locker interview the next day, whatever, but went out of his way to mention how much of a warrior Kincaid was and how hard it was for him to tough it out during his injury. You don't say that for no reason. Josh isn't going out of his way to say that for no reason. We know that on the surface how tough it was. That dude, who knows what he was trying to do to get out on the field. So I'm excited to see a fully healthy Dalton Kincaid, whether he's a little skinnier than you think or not. Like, I'd rather just see his knee healthy and have him running at full speed, because when he's running at full speed, he usually gets open and catches a lot of footballs. And that's going to help the Buffalo Bills this year. So that's what it came down to for me. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, you have to give these guys some context with the injury. It's the same with Coleman. Coleman broke his wrist, bro. Like that is a hard injury to just jump back in from midway through your rookie year. And then you're trying to like catch a football and you're not sure if your wrist is going to jam when you're first starting to, like, just not enough discussion about injuries, how hard it is to integrate yourself back during a football season from a serious one, or try to tough one through one. So that's why I'll be hopeful for Dalton Kincaid going forward. I think that's where I'm going to leave this, guys.
Yeah, for sure. I think sky's the limit with him, along with this offense. They've shown they can get it done without, a bona fide number one. So hey, I have full faith in them doing it again this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I totally agree about the injury point. That's a conversation we could have for another show. But too often, fans forget that these are all human beings that are playing a sport, and that they're not superhuman. They're not superheroes. They're not immune from pain and uh, things that all the rest of us deal with. Just because they battle it out doesn't mean that they don't deal with the impact of it. And like, to use a hockey reference, 2 seasons ago, Tage Thompson was playing hurt the whole year. He had 29 goals, and fans wanted to say he was a bust or that he was going back to his old self. And then he's healthy this year, and he gets 15 more goals and finishes with 44. Like, injuries impact performance, whether we want to accept it or not. And a lot of the times, we never know the full story of what they're actually dealing with, because teams are very, very cryptic with what they report. And also, some of that is because they don't want opposing teams to target their injuries. So
That too.
it's tough, because if a player complains about an injury, fans will call them out for being soft and not being a team player. But then if they don't perform and they don't disclose an injury, then we just say that they're a crappy player, when a lot of times we don't know the full story of what's going on.
Well said, Bunt. Well said. But that'll do it for tonight's episode. Thank you to our sponsor, Picasso's Pizza. We paid the bills. We'll be back next week to talk more Buffalo Bills football. But for tonight, enjoy your Tuesday evening, folks. Have a great night. And as always, go Bills.